Pluto, and we would love to thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. My name is Camille Trotter.
I'm Elena Koros.
Maggie Fu.
I'm Cameron Harris.
And we have one other student, but he's in class right now, so he's going to be here very soon.
2 minutes.
His name is Sui, and together we are Pluto.
Okay, so today we are going to talk to you guys about a group of people that are neglected in the field of medicine, pregnant women. Now, before I go and talk about why we should care about pregnant women in the medical field, we are going to show you a short clip of the reactions Georgetown students had when we told them just how neglected these women are. Now you could go.
Lauser Library.
At 1,500?
Maybe like half that.
300?
150 range, I don't know.
400? 500? So like 30%? Okay.
30%, like 150.
500 of them?
What if I told you there were only 12?
It's pretty shocking.
Okay. That's sad. Can we have some more drugs, please?
I was actually thinking about this earlier because my mom was talking about all the things you can't do when you're pregnant. She told me you can't take allergy medicine when you're pregnant, and I said I'm probably gonna die then. And I was like, Mom, why haven't they made up some new drugs that pregnant women can take? And she said, I don't know. And that was it.
Wow, okay. What, do you know why?
Wait, so they can't take medicine?
Is that for a reason or what?
The reason they haven't tested them yet, so they don't know if they're safe. Yeah, but who's gonna volunteer for that?
Is that like out of like laziness they haven't like been tested? I don't know, or lack of like interest, or is it like a general concern that those would be like detrimental to a pregnancy or something?
What does the FDA do for people who aren't white males? We've been studying in LGBT and medicine, just like all of the problems that came from trying to get AIDS drugs approved and stuff, so I'm like not surprised that something that doesn't affect 100% of like the male population is not made readily available.
Okay, so only 12 drugs approved. Wow. So as you can see from these people, there are so many reactions to this kind of information. Some were confused, some were irritated, some were just completely shocked, and I think it's pretty fair to say that we all had similar reactions. My first reaction was, why in the world would this be the case? Why can't pregnant women have medicines that they need? And it so happens that the International Review Board has strict limitations where they don't want women to be tested in clinical trials because they have many fears.
Pregnant women or women?
Oh, pregnant women, sorry. The first being that they don't want to put these pregnant women in a higher risk than they need to be because in pregnancy, a woman's body changes drastically and they don't know how drugs might affect the woman. Second, they don't want to put high risk on the fetus. They want to have it the least risk possible so that innately causes more restrictions. So the question here is, does this actually benefit these pregnant women? Does it benefit the baby? And we say no. According to our professor, Maggie Little, over 400,000 pregnant women a year have some significant medical illness, whether it be cancer, preeclampsia, you name it. Without medicine, pregnant women have a higher risk of suffering or dying from these illnesses, which is not something we want. And according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, 5.4 million pregnancies are exposed to medications each year, and less than 10% of those medications determine the fetal risk. So basically, rewording that, pregnant women, since they don't have approved medications, they take things that are unapproved and have little information about whether it's going to put their baby at risk. So we find a more ideal situation would be to take a little bit more risk by putting these pregnant women into clinical trials, and then allowing for there to be less risk when a woman is pregnant of suffering from illness or dying from an illness, or the baby turning out deformed or possibly dead. So, yeah.
So as Camille had mentioned, there are regulatory protections that provide safeguards for these pregnant women in clinical research. Well, these regulations operate with the presumption to exclude these women and only permit inclusion under certain circumstances. So current regulations for approving research involving pregnant women is in 45 CFR 46.111 subpart B. And there's 6 requirements that are in here. I guess I'll paraphrase them. If they are determined to be scientifically appropriate, preclinical studies, including animal and clinical studies on non-pregnant women, they have to provide data to assist in risk assessment. There has to be minimal risk, no more than minimal risk to the fetus. The word minimal is always in question. Risks in research are minimized as possible. Consent of the woman is required. Consent of the woman and the father, if present, is required. And no monetary or inducements can be offered in these clinical trials. So the follow-up question, and Camille touched on this, was that what are the main reasons that pregnant women have been excluded? A common explanation for this exclusion is because of the desire to do no harm. Yet clinical care during pregnancy often actually use medications that are untested in pregnancies. And another broad explanation for exclusion of pregnant women from research is the overinterpretation of the federal guidelines that preclude participation unless several requirements have been met. So some researchers may presume that pregnant women are unwilling to participate in the research, even if they are eligible. And so our group, with the limited amount of time and resources that we had in our hands, we realized that we didn't necessarily have the bandwidth to gear our projects towards altering policy right away. And so, as you noticed in the video, we instantly recognized that there was a staggering knowledge gap that needed to be filled about concerning the limited drugs and resources available to pregnant women. And so for this, the premise of our project is to spark a conversation that would shed light on this knowledge gap. And we are hoping that through this public awareness effort, this conversation can bubble up to those who have influence to speak for these women and lead to change.
Elena.
Camera and audience.
Oh, right, sure. So I'm going to stand up for this because I project more. So we started our project with kind of understanding that Arthur kept telling us, like, don't pick an audience, right? But we realized that we're dealing with a very complex web of people here. So we started, a lot of our discussions had to do with who our audience was later on, how are we going to get to these people, who the general audience is, who the targeted audience is. And by targeted, I mean people who have a stake in this, an emotional stake that's easily recognizable that we can capitalize on. But here's a scenario. You're walking from, Epicurean all the way to Car Barn, and you see a poster about pregnant women. What's going to get you to stop and care? That's the question that we're trying to address when we're targeting our efforts to a general audience. For our targeted audience, sure, now you have a little bit of a stake in this. You care. You've heard somebody is dying. But what makes you continue caring? What makes you riled up or willing to make a change? Then you get to the two other things, are the projections of audience, big pharma and regulatory bodies. We don't really necessarily have any strategies targeted towards them, but it's just a realization that these two are a smaller part of the general and targeted audience for future strategies to be built on. Our strategy booklet is not cohesive. It's not like one, I'm sorry, it is cohesive. It's not one after the other. Sorry, wrong words, I had a long day. It's not one after the other, but you can take it one after the other if you so do wish. It is built as a comprehensive strategy or as an independent approach to everything. So to compound on that, there is a timeline of how we see this progressing into the normal day dialogue. First, it's an obscure issue for the general public. Right? So this is where me and a bunch of other kids, like the videos, don't really know what's going on. We have no idea that pregnant women don't have any drugs. We have no idea that pregnant women are dying. We just thought it was all happening. And then the general public begins to discuss this issue. So then it becomes kind of more of a common thing. You know, have you heard about the Nets winning the ball game? Have you heard about pregnant women dying from medication? We hope that happens. Then there's national focus on this discussion. There's people actually concerned, there's stakeholders, there's regulatory bodies, there's parties being drawn up, there's actual activists working. So that's basically where our strategies end. But we realize that there's going to be trailblazing pharmaceutical companies that hope to capitalize on the different dynamic that we're trying to put forth. And then it finally becomes a legal issue. But those are like projections for the future. So now I'm going to turn it over to Elena, who's going to stand up. Great. I'm a trendsetter.
We spent a lot of time constructing our strategy, how we would reach these audiences. And initially, we talked about all different types of feelings, and we decided that the feelings of empathy and the feeling of injustice were the two that we wanted to explore deeper. So empathy being the feeling that you understand and share another person's experiences and emotions, injustice that a situation lacks fairness or violates the rights of others. So, when we were exploring empathy is the hardest, we decided that we wanted to tell true stories of real people who are suffering, that other people can relate to in a way that leads them to think, hey, this could happen to me, this could happen to my brother, my sister, my daughter. Bring it back home to them. And the audience level should connect. The audience should connect with the testimonies, some of which we will show eventually. They should also be able to take those experiences and relay them onto their own lives. And what that would look and feel like is showing faces, showing people, showing emotions. So next, we really looked at injustice. So that spark makes you want to do something. This isn't right. The strategy is to provide information, stories, understanding in a way that makes people want to change a current situation. Audience members should perceive inequality. When they see these surprising images, facts, maybe they're even dramatized in a way. Maybe it involves acting as opposed to real people, like the empathy, feeling strategy. They should want to do something. Ultimately, after a lot of discussion, we decided that these strategies are best utilized when combined, and that's where we have the heart and the spark. And we decided to do that in a couple of ways. Cameron will explain one in a second, I'll explain one later. But when we were talking about this, we came up with a hashtag, something that we really use to encompass this idea that we could use empathy and injustice at the same time. And that's the prognosis hashtag. Of course, prognosis, medicine, shock, illness, pregnancy, joy. Maybe you empathize with someone who's pregnant. So the core of our strategy is combining these two feelings to get people to want to do something and connect with stories.
So, me again, hi. So prognosis, it sounds like a household term to us, like I'm almost confident that it should be on Twitter now, but I don't know what your guys' take on that. So I'm going to explain the first strategy we have to. It's called shockingly empathetic. It's not the best name, I came up with it, that's why. So basically the strategy is to invoke feelings of empathy by providing graphic videos, images that feel familiar but have a shocking twist at the end. Now I'm going to reference one of the stories of one of our group members, Maggie here, and you guys have heard the story 100 times because we defend most of our actions by referencing the story, and some of you haven't. Basically, when Maggie was in, would you like to tell the story?
No.
Okay. Basically, when Maggie was in China, she saw a really poor person who's eating dirt out of ramen noodles cup. And the thing is, we're both wondering, we're both from third world countries. Well, she's not from third world country, I'm from third world country. And I go, what makes you what really stuck about that? And she's like, well, I remember it was a ramen noodles cup. And I go, well, you know, there's something to that because it's very familiar. Ramen noodles are 50 cents at Costco. It's not a big deal. But the fact that somebody's eating dirt out of ramen noodles cup is a very powerful image because it seems like something, this familiar object that should be really poor that should be really cheap is now being used to show the depths of poverty. So that's what we're trying to replicate here now. So if you turn to the next page on the strategy booklets, and on the back we have a more comedic approach to the shockingly empathetic. And this is just basically a small comic that we've made, and it tries to juxtapose medicine in 200 BC to medicine today. I giggled. The next one, I'm not sure if you guys are done, is basically this picture of a woman holding her baby, but she's wearing a little cap. She's obviously a cancer patient. Now, the thing is, there's a bit of familiarity with it. It's like a mother holding her baby, but then you get stuck with like, why is she wearing a hat? Why is she a cancer patient? Those two things don't really inherently mix. But you're lulled into a false sense of security. You think it's a picture of a mother holding her baby. But then the caption and the hashtag is supposed to tie it back into the prognosis concept. And the third image that we've actually generated is a depression ad. I've made my own medicine called Catharsis. And basically that's the answer to your depression. And like all ads, it's supposed to solve everything. Unless you're pregnant. Then you're on your own. So basically, you know, you're supposed to see this every day. This is something that you find off the street. Arjun's yawning, so obviously I should wrap this up. And, and so basically, if you go to the next page on this, there's 3 other ideas that we're currently working with. The video is something we're trying to get a Georgetown student director to help us with. And the 2 advertisements are, sorry, it's right after the ad, Professor. And the 2 ads are something we can hopefully get done soon, if need be. This is sufficient. So now we'll go to the next strategy, which brings Elena back to the front.
Sure. So I almost included this image in my strategy. But there's a reason that we can't, and that's because Maggie took this photo, and it's a woman who's not actually pregnant. Not actually sick. She was an actress, and we dramatized this image, so that would not fall under my strategy here. But the concept is really the same, and that's that there's a natural contradiction in a sick, pregnant woman. Between those feelings, empathy, and justice, between feelings of joy and sadness. So, my strategy, based on our strategy of feelings, is to really let women speak for themselves. Real pictures, real videos, real images. We're hoping that people can connect with these women, with their families, and we want to use a webcam and home photo style technique as opposed to any sort of professional image capturing or videography. We also want to connect real stats with real people so that they're not just floating out there on their own, that you see a stat and you see the face that it's affecting. So we made a sample video. Just a little disclaimer, these video clips were pulled from YouTube. They're not copyrighted, but I'm still trying to reach out to these women to get their approval. And I'm really looking into what that looks like. I know the rhetoric professor, what's your name? Matt recommended that we source from YouTube, and there's a lot of advantages to that. One is you get these women really when they're in the middle of something. They're sick right now, and they're posting a webcam diary, as opposed to interviewing people after the fact. The other thing is there's such a variety of testimonies, whereas reaching out can be really difficult when it's a sensitive subject if women haven't chosen to share already.
I am pregnant and I have epilepsy.
I got the bald head going. I'm actually going to have Archie cross this off because it's kind of starting to bug me. And the big belly.
So I'm 36 weeks and I have preeclampsia.
Since this pregnancy has been so rough, I feel physically drained, emotionally drained. You know, the doctors said that having all those seizures might affect the oxygen to the baby, which is definitely frightening. but then I also am worried about what the medicine will do to the baby. So right now, despite, you know, the 2 different medications that I've taken and the nausea and depression and things like that that I've experienced, my baby bump is pretty significant. Pretty good so far at 10 weeks.
I started having pain in my side. The pain got slowly, progressively worse. And it was not any of the things that they had suspected. Actually, what I had was a form of ovarian cancer that was not connected to my ovary, not connected to my liver, not connected to anything either way. It was very large and it was free-floating in my abdomen. So at that point, they had recommended that we would probably need to terminate the pregnancy. We met with Dr. Aubrey again, and then we also met with my oncologist, Mary Cunningham. Both physicians felt that we were safe enough with our chemotherapeutic agents to go forth with the pregnancy, which we were thrilled about. I'm not worried about the cancer. It's pretty bad. I just want this baby boy to be okay.
Part of preeclampsia is almost like a migraine that never goes away, and I've had that now for about 3 weeks, and it's getting a lot worse now that my swelling is getting worse, as you can see from my face. Preeclampsia can turn really quickly. I'm at a risk for seizures and a stroke. So, bunch of scary stuff I don't want to think about. I'm just trying to ride this out and try to keep the baby in for as long as I can without an induction and letting him go through the labor process naturally. I don't know though if that's, you know, going to be in my hands.
So I hope that demonstrates that real women can speak for themselves.
Did we do this?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I just had a conflict. So my name is Zui Mai. I'm the youngest of the group. I am a freshman in the SFS, and I'll be touching on the last point, one of the last point of our presentation today. And it is actually the glorification point is also one of the last point that we touch upon over the semester. The premise for this sort of rhetoric campaign is that once the general public is already familiar with the topic of the debate, with the controversy, we hope to proceed onto a new rhetoric parameter. We want the debate to go on in a new parameter. And that is, we want to delegate honors, we want to respect the woman, the pregnant woman, those who engage in clinical trials the same way. We look up to our, look up to the veterans in the Army. That's the way that we're trying to do. So we hope to build a new culture, and in that we respect, we delegate honor, and in doing so, we hope to incentivize more women to engage in clinical trial, and also incentivize the big pharmacy companies, the FDA, the new regulations to be more open towards including pregnant women in clinical trials. And so one of the examples we have, if you can turn to this page, the glorification page, is that the hero for the country and is the woman who engaged in fighting Taliban, fighting Al Qaeda overseas in Afghanistan, and those who the hero for science is those who engage in clinical trial at home, those who trying to make the future generations safer by sacrificing, I guess themselves. I'm sorry.
Putting themselves at risk for others.
Language barrier. So one of another acts that we have is she enlisted in the military to fight for her country, and also, but she also enrolled in clinical trial to help her for future generation, and that's one of the points that we're trying to raise here. So to build a new culture surrounding talking about the pregnant woman in clinical trial, and in that we hope to incentivize more women to engage in that. Pharmaceutical company to have more clinical trial that include pregnant women, and hopefully the FDA, the NIH, and regulatory bodies would be more open toward pregnant women in clinical trial.
So those are our products, our deliverables so far. We haven't yet posted them anywhere where you could find them. We have some ideas for that. But at this point, I want to open it up to you for questions, or I could brief over our ideas for implementation and measuring success. Really up to you guys. I know we've been talking for a while.
Nice job, and it's really long over time too. Let me ask one really tiny thing. The tiny thing is the stats on all the drugs. Does that include over the counter or just prescription, or?
So actually those 12 approved drugs, and I confirmed this with Dr. Little actually, these 12 drugs were purposed for labor and delivery only, or pain medications.
Okay. But in some of the numbers,
and
we don't have to focus on that, but some of the numbers we'll have like the baseline of how many drugs are approved versus, I'm just wondering if that includes over the counter or not. So,
it doesn't.
It's prescription.
Oh.
Okay.
Prescription.
And then the big question, the big one I have, so you did a nice job of talking about, how this is part of an overarching effort in the different concentric circles and so forth. But I'm wondering how, so if you take something like, the AIDS case that one of your folks on camera mentioned, the activism was connected with a particular ask. And on this one, you yourselves have talked about how complicated it is. It's equivalent of sort of sacrificing your country. So the real choices here. Is there a way to sort of link up the kinds of things like that incredibly powerful video with a particular thing you're looking for now? Does it have to be so step by step where you're just starting a conversation? It just feels like there could be maybe more of a link to getting to the end point with what you're setting up. Or people are going to say, okay, well, what do I do about it?
That's a big reason for the prognosis hashtag that we have. And it's supposed to be, for us, kind of the unifying element that ties it all together even Elena has, if you would like to talk about the website that you recently purchased.
Oh.
So basically she bought the domain for the website. All initiative, all our own. That's awesome. I wasn't even thinking about that. And so she bought that so we can, build that website up with the future, kind of put the facts on, put channels of outlet work on. But the basic thing is our work is supposed to, once again, spark a discussion, and hopefully by using that tagline to get you to that source.
So when you got to that source, why don't I just raise this and then you don't have to answer it now because I want to ask questions. But when you got to that site, is it tell the FDA to change some part of that regulation, tell pharma that they're over-interpreting the regulation, tell women to volunteer, all of those? Anyway, that's the kind of thing
If I could just mention something briefly too. So I thought a lot about your question, and I think early on, Professor Little and I had a discussion about how powerful this is as a medical issue, but also as a women's issue. And I don't want to say women's issues are really in right now because but they are, people are talking about things like this. And part of the reason that I, even in my implementation section, in our implementation section, have these types of social journalism outlets like BuzzFeed, Jezebel, Upworthy, all of them have been featuring pregnancy and medicine in some capacity recently. People are willing to talk about this. And from the video too, people are surprised by this. And I think there's a lot of power in seeing what happens when a large group of young women, of average age women, older women even, but that young women base, I think there could be a lot of power if all the young women are talking about what's going to happen when I'm pregnant and I can't take my allergy medication or cancer runs in my family.
I agree 100%. But sort of to do what? And I'll just say one last thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But so there's two kinds of issues. They're related. They're both related to climate. One is you want to take your allergy medicine and you're pregnant. The other is you've got preeclampsia and there's no known remedy. Those are two different kinds of medical problems, both of which relate to clinical trials.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think there's something really charismatic about almost all of these materials, kind of like compelling, rhetorically speaking, right? I think I'm agreeing with David here in a way. I'm pretty suspicious of the stage. Like first we'll do X, then we'll get Y, then Z will happen. So like I want you to think about a more compressed and like layered simultaneous strategy for these guys, right? And I think that's where you're trying to go with the comments about Jezebel and Upworthy and so on, right? Because you mentioned a couple times like, oh, we want women to use the webcam to do X, right? But then I, of course, wrote down like, well, for what and where, right? So like, prognosis can be the unifying element, like you said, Cameron, right? That's a hashtag, right?
Right.
It's an indexical tool, and it's housed somewhere, right? Like the activities that you want to see happen. That's the big comment, I guess. I've got some little ones, like injustice, for example, isn't a feeling. I would say, like just in your own indignance, right, or outrage. That's stupid English teacher stuff. I'm sorry.
No, it's helpful.
But like in the video, for example, like you spelled Shakira's name 2 different ways.
Did I actually?
Yeah, right. So
Shakira with an H at the end. Did I not put the H at
L? One of the moments where her name's on it. Like that matters, right? Text like pregnant with ovarian cancer. That is a comma between pregnant and with. She's not carrying ovarian cancer to term.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right, these are two different simultaneous things, right? Like so, I mean, the grammar matters, but it matters because
it does.
It goes to meaning.
And we have a typo in a comic too. I'm sorry to say it.
Little bit.
Thank you. No, that's what we need.
Don't zoom in on the text.
What?
Don't zoom. So don't make the text move.
Don't make the text move. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is my fledgling videography skills.
It's very good.
Okay.
So, lots to like in this. You have a very clear statement of the problem that you're trying to address. That's terrific. And in your response, you've actually thought through the methods, what are the components of the methods. And I feel like what you came up with are very powerful and even motivational, and I end up in exactly the same place both of you guys are. So, in fact, you come up with something so powerful, you should expect somebody to look at it and say, now what should I do? You know, if these weren't as good as they are, then I think all you can hope for is start a conversation. But I think what you've arrived at is like this one. Unless you're pregnant, then you're on your own. Well, wow, so what should I do? I mean, you've really taken your audience right to the point where they're ready for action. I think your stuff is that compelling. So let me ask you the question. A pregnant woman looks at this, sees it, and says, wow, what should I do? What do you want them to do?
Tell me.
No, I think I want them to...
And don't tell me go to a website.
No, I was going to say, I think I want them to tell their neighbor. Like, I want them to tell their friends.
Have their neighbor do what?
Tell her neighbor.
So all that's happening is people are talking about it. That would change it.
So, and then ultimately...
Stress pregnant women,
Well, ultimately, I guess, I would want that momentum to put pressure on people who can make the policy changes.
That's what we're all saying, which is you've got really good stuff. Take the next step. Tell the person what to do. And let's talk about an actionable
right, like sign a petition, something like action.
It's already in a couple of ads. Enlist in clinical trials. And even if they don't exist.
Just the thinking.
No, I know, but I mean, there's something sort of interesting, right, about like this. Like, I can just imagine it's like waiting with women, like asking their doctors and like.
Well, then that's still people talking.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's going to be changed.
So we could save that for another conversation, but I think
no, I think it's an important one.
You're ready to somehow embed that in your concept, that telling people what to do.
Okay.
And I've got some specific comments that I do want to make to help you refine some of this stuff. But let me ask this question. What can be done right now?
What do you mean?
Can a woman sign up for a clinical trial?
No, because there's restrictions. So they're not able, like, even if they want to, they can't.
Okay. So, and I'm trying to understand, because I think we're all there. Totally agree with everything that's been said. So if a woman can't sign up for a clinical trial, I mean, if you're really talking about the thing that you need to change is policy, basically. You're right, actually changing policy takes a long time. But there are plenty of examples of steps that can be taken between now and then. Just signing a petition might be enough right now.
Right.
It's super achievable. If you've already bought the domain, you can set up a website with a petition on it.
Right. But who's the petition to do what?
Well,
that was my question.
So that was going to be my question. So, okay, you're going to try to change a policy. And you're trying to get a bunch of people to have a conversation about changing the policy. Who has to change that policy?
FDA, I suppose, right?
Is it the FDA? Is it Congress?
I've heard it many things. I've heard from Maggie that nobody's offering them, and she just mentioned that a minute ago. So I think when we were discussing this like a couple of minutes ago, it was about changing a culture. And so it's like we were thinking about this, and we were saying, well, you know, it's a drug company. What do they want? Money. Okay, so how are we going to get this money? Well, there's...
Okay, so...
no, you're listening.
I love what was said. There's so much to like here, and you're absolutely on the right track. Okay, and so I'm so excited for and with you. I think there's a layer of accuracy you need to work on, and I'll give you a few examples, but then I think we should meet, because we don't have to get into the full weeds here. Okay, your rendition of what the regs said is wrong. So the regs don't always require no more than minimal risk. If there's a prospect of direct benefit to mother or fetus, then the risk can go as high as the potential benefit to proportionality.
Yeah.
There are clinical research trials that are happening now. HIV/AIDS, lots, okay, because they have to deal with pregnant women because they don't want to transfer the virus to the. There are depression trials going on. There are a few cancer trials going on. They're very few and far between. They're just way less than we need. So the regs allow it. There's some happening. Pharma is not the arm to deal with. It's not about money. It's that as soon as they do research with a drug, they have to turn that over to the FDA, and it goes on the labeling for the drug, which means that any what's that term? Adverse outcome from a pregnant woman taking the drug, even if it's not related to the drug, she now can sue the pharma company. If they haven't done the trial, they have immunization from liability. What needs to change, probably the most proximate, is NIH and Congress. Congress will probably have to come up with a legislative solution to it, and NIH, because it is a funding agency that is about public health, so they don't care about liability. They don't produce the drugs, they just produce the knowledge. If you got Office of Women's Health at the NIH, which is really interested in this issue, so so watch the compelling ad. Let NIH know. And then they hear that the constituents, right? And then they go to Congress and say, Congress, look what's happening. We really need you to pass some legislation to change the incentive structure, or we need to switch the regs. I just a few tweaks would potentially do it.
So that's great, but well, I don't know, I'm going to say something didactic, but it's like, it concerns me. We've been asking for a long time. I mean, it shows why, like, the advertising stuff cannot be divorced from fundamental knowledge about the issue. I mean, you got us all to the brink of this, and then basically, kind of let us off a cliff, right? So, I mean, that's really, so all the stuff you did, still really good, still really useful, but, I mean, it's why the knowledge part of the stuff really matters and can't be divorced from the other stuff you're talking about.
Can I also say one other big comment, and there's, again, so much I love. I can't decide whether I love or hate prognosis, But it's so cool as a hashtag, I think I'm going for it. I love Hero for Science. That's freaking genius. I don't think the production values quite came out of the Cancer Woman, but the idea is fantastic. Okay. On the video, so, and again, I think we should all meet, but I want to name the issue. You can do a lot of damage on this issue. Every place in your video where you were sort of potentially scaring people about the side effects of medicine, it's actually one of the things that we're most concerned to tell people. You have to take the freaking epilepsy medicine. It's way worse for the baby. These are just trade-offs. If it's serious, if you've got stage 4 cancer, you need to take chemo, and it may be bad for the baby. But dying while pregnant is worse for the baby. So you need to be very careful not to feed the flames of people freaking out about taking medicine. So only 12 medicines are approved, but medicines are used in pregnant women. Not enough, and not with an adequate knowledge base. It's more subtle. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, that's
so
a really
you
good
think
point.
about only 12 women, pregnant women deserve more. They deserve to have knowledge.
They deserve more.
But don't make medicine sound scary for pregnant women. That's pushing the cause backwards.
So that actually relates to another thing that I was going to. So one is it relates a little bit to this inflating thing about what drugs that help pregnant women versus drugs that are out there and pregnant women take them. But and I agree that cancer thing I didn't know that that's what it meant. Plus the woman's not pregnant.
But she was hip hop.
Yeah, and she's not pregnant. She's got a baby there. So one thing on the other ad, and then one thing back to Maggie's point. So on the military analogy, so that explicit, I was worried you didn't mean this, but it turned out you did, that you're taking a risk for a larger goal, but one of the biggest things that comes out of that is you're in doing this clinical trial, you're putting yourself at major risk. So if that's not what you want to say, but this all gets to a bigger thing to me. So you mentioned injustice in passing. You didn't talk actually about injustice. I mean, you talked about the fact, the idea that we should be doing more for women is different from saying there's injustice. And I think that's part of the, so on all these things, it comes back to what Meg was saying. I mean, these are just tough choices, right? And you want to get past them, but the sense that, so that's sort of you're stuck there, right? Rather, there's this underlying tone in this that there's some easy thing that just isn't being done. But that's not really where you ended up in terms of what the problem is. And I think we need to, when you're pushing these people to do that.
I know what you mean.
It feels like if only people, that the only there's sometimes it felt to me, and maybe it's partly from other conversations, that the only barrier here is just will, as opposed to choices about what you actually do. I mean, to what extent do you want the women in the clinical trials at risk? To what extent do you sometimes have to make a horrifying choice about what kind of medical care you're going to give when you're sick, when you have a major illness, when you're pregnant?
So I actually do think they're right on the big issues,
right.
And it is an injustice because pregnant women are overlooked in allocation of public health effort. There are great models for how to do trials with pregnant women ethically.
Okay, so that's...
There really are.
Okay,
there
so
are
that's...
progressive trials being done. So again, it's kind of,
so that's
you need to work on that message a little bit. As opposed to just, I see what you're saying. Sometimes you might be getting the message, shit, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Can't take the medicine because of the side effect, but I'm going to die from cancer. And so what's the solution? You don't take more risk. Do you see what I mean? But I think you're 90% of the way there, but that last 10% needs to be right, or else you can, the message can go not just less compelling, but kind of wrong. Okay? But again, I think those are more on the tweak side, and then again, getting the facts and the
facts, and then on the action issue. Now that you've laid out various pathways, here's a way to handle it. So this is still good. So you talk to National Council of Women's Organizations. You ask them to post whatever ones you settle on. The action step is go sign this petition. The petition would ask for action by blank. Now, in putting together what that petition is, you'll have to solidify all the things that we've been talking about. But that petition gets delivered to the White House, and they have a deal where if you submit any petition with more than 100,000 signatures, they will promise to take action. that's what you're shooting for. Okay? Now, what's nice about well, it's been out there for a couple of years. They had to raise the number. So they started with a lower number.
We've actually raised it 3 times.
But this outlet, so I'm trying to say, here's what your overall engagement strategy is, right? And so your National Council of Women's Organizations can be your way to get to a lot of women if they agree to promote it. But a lot of what we've just discussed is what's going to be contained in the petition, because the petition itself, the wording there, will have to address the very things that we've been talking about for the past 15 minutes or so. Okay.
I also have an implementation point that I wanted to get to, and I liked what you said, National Council, and but I think there are other organizations you can look at, specifically organizations where there are women with these diseases that are also pregnant who are addressing these issues. And the one that came up for me, one because I do some work with them, but also because of your submitting your own ideas, is like Susan B. Komen, right? So organization of women who have cancer or are related to people who have cancer.
Anything for publicity.
Will do anything for publicity, but is actually concerned about this issue. I mean, they have some policy people who are working on this very issue. I'm sure we'd love to partner with you on this. And they have experience doing exactly what you're talking about, which is having women tell their own story, because that's the whole foundation of what Komen does.
The other thing related, and actually tell me if this is a good idea or not, because I don't know.
And I can connect you to people.
But to sort of broaden it and give it an extra, expert air, if you could also get like an OBGYN organizations to help get it.
I was looking to, I was researching the national...
Not instead of the sites.
Wait, to get into, sorry, just a second.
Would to also be promoting the petition.
I have a professional organization. ACI will promote the petition, but they support this effort. We have a new committee guideline coming out.
So is the end your petition, or it seems like it's the strategy? I mean, so again, maybe we should mention the front. This group is from Mexico, where we specifically stated that the ends could be emergent. It sounds like you guys have focused on the strategy that gets, that equips you or the cause or whatever with a lot of power to do things like the petition, but also other things. You talk about a lot of ways.
So what we want to do is just define an engagement strategy for the remaining 2 weeks of the class, and so I think we just identified that engagement step that you guys can take. But we'll follow up with an email that lays it out, that shows that we all are
so
we're
the same thing. These prints are done tomorrow. Am I saying Wednesday, right? Yeah. And by Friday we are sending each team, our unified, here's what we think you should do for the next weeks, and here's the product, the artifacts, if it's 3 things or 1 thing or whatever. Okay, so you've really got your merchant orders and you can be really intentional about how to spend the
One comment I had from before too, the National Council of Women's Organizations is a coalition with a lot of the types of organizations that you're talking about. So I looked in their list and there's like a dozen that are very relevant.
Because I want to give you a federation that can maybe get to a lot of people.
Right.
Really nice.
Yeah,